I thought it was kind of I don't know, for me it's sort of, a lot of the questions I had in chapters 1 and 2 were kind of addressed or more fully expounded upon in chapter 3. And so I thought it was really good. But let's let's follow along with the study questions and see where that takes us, see what we cover. All right, so the first question is, think about some special guests you've invited to your home for dinner. What thoughts went through your head as you prepared? What did you do to make them feel welcome? How might those gifts and actions be translated over into your relationship with God?
There's just like sense of anticipation, like you want to have things done a certain way to impress some kind of good experience upon them.
Yeah.
I guess sometimes you might be trying to show off your cooking or something.
Definitely.
I guess it kind of depends on your nature. That's what depends on the nature of the company, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you could, we could have people for game night. It's like super casual, and you're mostly there for just the for the yeah, or just the company. But then also you might be another sense, like I don't know, you could actually be there for the food, and you're maybe just sharing tips on food prep.
I want them to feel at home, so I always think of, do they have kids, like, what toys do I have for them to play with, are they on a special diet, do I have things to accommodate that, do they not drink, do we have some drinks that aren't alcoholic, do we have enough space for people to relax around, like have their own space, and not feel like everyone's jammed in the kitchen. And then usually I kind of do a brief tour, so it's like you don't have to ask me where the bathroom is or where the cups are for water, you can kind of just, help yourself.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I focus on.
And so, my kids would be like, all right guys, we're gonna take, the next half hour or so and really kind of try and clean up, and then they always ask who's coming over. So you make the preparations, you clean up the house, you make it look appropriate for company. Not to say it has to be perfect if people drop by, but when you're inviting somebody over, yeah.
I have something to say, is that if you invite your family or friends who are not Christians, you really don't just say what everybody else has said. But I remember when I was with Calvary Chapel, and we went to missionary work down in Mexico, and so I used to be the church photographer. I took slideshows, with the carousels. So I invited everybody over, and I cooked everybody a Mexican meal and played Mexican music, and then we showed the missionary work of Mexico. So it was a way of celebrating of what we had done.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So it adds the Christian atmosphere to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reminded kind of what I touched on, maybe I think I use inviting Ken over as an analogy, and it's like, I'm inviting him over, cook a nice meal, have a nice bottle of wine, but the goal isn't the meal itself; it's actually the relationship. When you invite somebody into your home, and I really like this analogy because I like having people over. A good meal definitely just sort of facilitates good conversation, getting to know people. And so I think it's a pretty good analogy for how Father Jeremy at least gets things started with sacrifices food. So kind of with that question in mind, what did you think about that first section, sacrifices food? I think we kind of touched on it last week. That there's this big theme that sacrifice has a lot to do with food. And he goes into a little bit, touches on what kind of offerings were given at the temple. It wasn't just animal sacrifice, and it wasn't always the whole burnt offering where every piece of the animal was consumed in the smoke, went up in smoke. It was a lot more meal-like, where a lot of the animal was eaten and only a small portion of the animal was given an offering to God. And then, I mean, the one, like, I don't know why this hit me so hard, but everything needing to be seasoned with salt was just, I thought that was super cool. I like to cook, and so I feel like I've had this conversation 5 times. It's like, I just can't cook. Well, what do you make? Oh, I made a pork tenderloin, and it just didn't turn out right. Well, how much salt did you put on it? I mean, a pinch. Yeah, well, okay, that's why it didn't taste good. Like, I mean, salt makes everything taste better. And so I don't know. I was just reminded of that, and then I of course was reminded of the Sermon on the Mount with Christ talking, saying, "You are the salt of the earth." I don't know. And it just all kind of flowed together a little bit.
I will confess, what I thought of when I read that was, I wonder what my doctor would say since I'm supposed to be on both sides of the fire. But that's okay, that was my first thought. My second thought was what you said.
Ken salted enough.
The story about the dedication of the temple, Solomon's temple, isn't that the one where they?
Oh, yeah.
How many 100,000?
20,000 oxen or something
So-
like that. Yeah.
So I've always read that as like, well, that's a lot of slaughter.
Yeah.
But then, if you kind of turn it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, like, so you got the county fair at the Fairplex. How many animals are being killed to feed all the people? But so it's, I don't know, it kind of turns the whole thing into maybe a really big celebration. That's how many people were here. They I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's good.
I like how, all the food needed to be prepared properly. It wasn't just, you take it out of the ground, you throw it on the altar, and you burn it.
No.
It's like you actually had to take the time to prepare it properly.
Then you bring
And whether it was the grain or,
Yeah.
it wasn't just the raw grain. You had to roast it or prepare it some way. Like every single thing had to be prepared as if you were gonna eat it. So it wasn't just a casual thing, it took time and thought.
Right, and it's not just, and again, the focus is not just, it's not the death. It's the offering, it's the communion effectively that act brings.
The intention, like you were saying, the thought you put into the intention. I found myself lacking that intention in a lot of aspects in the church. For instance, tithing, and now I'm like, I don't even pay attention to why I'm tithing, right? So, and that's in many other aspects, not just in the sacrificial context.
It reminds me too, when we make prospera, that's what I miss about making prospera, is that there's prayers that you do before you start and while you do it and after you're done. But then, because you're the one making it, you get to pray for specific people as you put all those holes in the sides or on all the different pieces after you've made the imprint.
Yeah.
And the privilege of that.
Yeah.
And then that's being offered at the altar.
Right. And that is yeah, it's all being offered, what you were offering is being offered at the altar, and then, prosper especially, the priest, as he's preparing the lamb, prays for the one who offered this gift as well. And it just kind of circle. Was there anything, this isn't a trick question, did the Eucharist come to mind as you guys were reading this section?
Yes.
For those shaking their heads, who would like to expound upon that thought?
I don't know if it was like at that moment. I think it was in the back of your mind, but but at the end, at some point, he mentions, sorry, that went right after, but he said something about the idea of there's, when he's talking about the give and take, the reciprocity, and all that. And then there's some point of it, such like you give, and there's giving back, and we give what God gives. And it's God is right, the offerer and the offer. We start thinking of those types of things, how we've almost like he led us this way, offered these things to me, and then he ultimately gave back in time, that the generosity, whoa, what could possibly be more? He gave us himself.
Yeah. Anyone else?
As I recall, I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I read the reading, but as I recall, I think it was a combination of reading about sacrifices aroma and sacrifices meal, food and aroma, is the fact that I just started thinking about how we do the incense in the church as well as the Eucharist in the church.
Yeah.
I was just kind of pondering the parallels between what he's talking about and what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And somewhere I thought he talked about table meal or something like that. I'm trying to remember now.
Well, and there are several words for altar that he went through.
Yeah.
Greek word, trapeza.
Yeah.
That means table, and then the Lord's table,
Right.
meaning the altar.
Right.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things that triggered it.
And then he says it suggests a shared meal as well, which I thought was pretty cool. Where the Eucharist really came to my mind was, I think Cindy, you kind of touched on this a little bit with preparation too, is that it wasn't just the flesh that was being prepared. It was the flesh, the grain, and wine, and these elements of a meal, and especially. He quotes a scholar that says, when the Hebrew ate flesh, he ate bread with it and drank wine. And when he offered flesh on the table of God, it was natural that he should add it to the same concomitants, which were necessary to make up a comfortable and generous meal. And it was, I just found that a fascinating parallel, that the flesh that's at the altar, that's on the altar, the blood that's also poured out there and sprinkled, that's coming from the animal that's sacrificed. With it, there's also bread and wine. And in some, we call it the unbloody sacrifice in the altar, but at the same time, at the consecration, all of those elements are still present. The flesh, the blood, the bread, the wine. And I don't know, I just thought that was kind of a super cool point. I hope he makes it later, or I hope he doesn't prove me wrong. So, but I thought that was a really, really interesting kind of point he makes.
I have a technical question. Since when a person's making pastoralized, has to say certain prayers, and they give it to you, but then I know that you put it on a table, it's separated from the altar. Is there any, do you pray there, and it only becomes you have to cut out the lamb, and then when it's at the altar, then you say the prayers and call down the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So that's when it becomes the body and the blood.
Yeah.
But does it still have enough holiness as a dedication or as a potential of being dedicated that the other table beforehand? Can you explain that a little bit more? You see where I'm getting at?
Well, I mean, I think I wanna, I'll kind of answer and then you tell me if I'm on the right track to what you're asking. To some extent, so you prepare it at the table of oblation or proscomidi. You cut out the lamb and you place it on the discos and you make your commemorations and things like that. And so at that point, I mean, it's not consecrated, and it is still bread and wine. But I would be comfortable saying that at that point it's blessed, and something beyond, bread that you just put on, you put peanut butter and jelly on.
Correct. That's
Yeah, is that where you're going?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
where I'm going.
Yeah, and so I mean, the andiduron that we get afterwards is the blessed bread that was prepared, and so I mean, yeah, it's different than perhaps conventional bread. It's not Wonder Bread, because it's blessed. I mean, we could. I won't say I won't get too complicated. Hi, Kat. But yes, all that to say is I'm comfortable saying that it is blessed and it is something other than just peanut butter and jelly sandwich bread at that point. Yes.
So, in the beginning of the section, sacrifice as a gift, when it's talking about the verbs for offering sacrifice, they were using led towards or carry towards or worn up, and when I read that, like that sounds awfully like the Theotokos being led to the temple, which was the child. And there could be some correlation in that. But I'm not sure. Sacrifice as gift.
Page 43.
This is the.
Okay.
Yeah. So the verbs used. So led toward, carried toward, and borne up, brought near and presented.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah. I mean, and that's, I mean, again, I didn't think about that, but I would certainly be comfortable with saying, especially the Theotokos, as a child, I mean, it's effectively being presented as a living sacrifice.
Was there ever a time when the Eucharist was more of a meal, a shared meal? Or has
Yeah.
it always been like a bite?
As far as amount, I'm not sure. I don't quite remember, but it was in the very early church. I mean, very very early. I'm going to say I don't know, but I think so, if I remember right. I'll check them.
I mean, there are some priests that, quite large Bibles.
There was a section in Corinthians where Paul's
We
kind
have
of scolding.
right, the feast that they eat
Before.
before. And
But yeah.
so like they would,
Yeah.
they would eat before.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. They would actually have a meal and then partake of the Eucharist. The fasting portion wasn't there, and so yes, that makes sense. That's right. Yeah, and so they would not fast before they received, and so it was actually, again, if I remember right, it was actually part of a communal meal. So, but it wasn't. I don't think it was the full communal meal. It was like the agape meal together, followed by the Eucharist. That's right.
And one other point, they used to take the bread home. Did, if I remember right.
I don't know,
Okay,
I'm not sure.
I have to double check, but it, I think that's one reason why we not put it in the cup. So it's more.
Well, there was, yeah, at some point, there was a problem with people taking it home and setting it on like their own little home altar. And sort of leaving it there, because it's Christ. But that's not what the Eucharist is for, it's to be consumed. And so, yes, but that wasn't a, that was considered a problem, that wasn't a common practice or even a Greek practice. So, all right, so, next question. Why do you wear perfume or cologne? Why do you use candles, oils, or sprays to make your home, office, or car smell good? And how might these thoughts translate into your relationship with God? So effectively, we're moving to the next section as sacrifice as aroma. I saw that hand raised, Madeline. That was a hand raise. Oh, no, you can't wave to babies. You raised your hands.
It's on my worst.
Sorry, Father.
Yeah, what, what here?
To me, this is like the most foreign part. Because we just, I mean, there's no incense in our lives except here in the church.
Are you saying only foreigners wear cologne?
Yes.
The aroma as sacrifice.
Right.
I mean, that part is like, okay, that is just not in our world.
I think that's when fathers.
It's funny, like they send candles.
We do entice people to come in our,
Yeah.
like, or perfumes.
And would the cost of such things make a difference, like with the nard that was poured out
Yeah.
on Jesus' feet, like they made a point that it was very expensive, so there's a sacrifice.
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think
Excellent.
yeah, I think you're clearly giving up something, but it's given up as an act of love in some sense.
So, I mean, kind of two things that we would use scent for is one, to attract, like that would be the cologne and the perfume. right?
Yeah.
But to mask, actually,
Yeah.
hide,
Right.
right? So I don't know if I remember where I heard it, but my understanding of like the sensing in the Old Testament and even in maybe that's part of the purpose is purification. So that'd be more of the masking or kind of aspect of. So I don't know if that's.
No, I think that's a good point.
I would.
And I mean, and there is, I mean, I don't know if it's technical or not, but like, in some sense, it's like purifying the air, like you're,
Sin stink.
yeah.
Well, my wife uses candles and,
Little plugins.
no.
I mean, they didn't say me, they're scents, right?
No, she has like she has a salt lamp and also some candles that she'll use from time to time, but no plugins. And she uses that, I mean, partly for what you were just talking about, to give a house a better smell than what it had. But also, she tends to do it more often when we are gonna have, well, she especially, let me put it that way, she especially does it when we're gonna have company over, because she wants the house to smell inviting, whatever that means.
Well, that's the thing that keeps coming to my mind. Both when you're saying the part of what you do and why you prepare for somebody coming over, and in particular this aroma thing, like we don't have this in the cultural norm. And one of the things that's always thrown me is when you come to a aromatic relic and you go to kiss it and you're just blown, right? I mean, this is heaven. This smells like heaven. Wait, what? And you don't even have a category for it. But the Lord comes to us in those miraculous ways, breaking in, whether it's incense or the glorious smelling myrrh emitting relic to bless us. Even when so I'm sort of rambling, when we would talk about blessing the Lord, it always would say, blessing the Lord, what does he need from us? What does he need from us, really? I mean, he owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, so he's complete in himself. What does he need from us? But when you invite someone over, you prepare really well so that you can bless them. And I think it impress them with your cooking it, but you just want to bless them so when they go away. And I think there's something there for when we approach the Lord and our worship that we just, in its simplest form, just want to bless him.
So Doug, can you help me understand what you mean by bless?
Okay, so if you, let's say that you're coming to my house, and I knew that you were just getting over COVID for the 14th time, and you're thinking about retiring, I don't know what else. I was like, you know what, I know Kim loves this particular meal, and we do everything that's right along the lines of just get your mind off it, show you a movie that you might not have seen that you really lighten your heart, and then you know, play with the grandkids and the dogs and whatever else, and you go away lighter and more joyful. Just having, you know that you've been loved on, right? So, the people in the South have a little bit of a sense of this. God bless your heart. It means different things, but they do have a sense of blessing as a thing.
And there's a, in your realtor world, I don't know that anybody does it anymore, but like there was this trick, like when when your house is about to be shown, bake chocolate chip cookies right beforehand.
Yes, they do.
And it's like you walk in and you get smacked with this beautiful aroma of chocolate chip cookies, and you feel home.
Wow. Okay.
And in some sense, like I was when for the last year there's a large construction and reno project in the parish we were in, and one of the parishioners was just saying, it doesn't feel like church, complaining, it just doesn't feel like church. There's construction dust and there's debris everywhere, and when I walk in, I don't smell the incense. It doesn't feel like church. So that scent was very important to them being able to walk in, and as the cherubic hymn say, leave all earthly cares behind them. And I think that in some sense, that helps us understand why incense is offered to God, and it makes us feel this way. We're created in God's image, it's an offering, it's a welcome.
There's toward the end of the chapter, he makes a comment, just talking about symbolism and this and the other thing, but and I think particularly with smell, it can be so powerful.
Yeah.
Like it can take you somewhere in an instant. I'll have moments where I get a whiff of the air and I'm back in my youth, because there's something about the quality of that moment, and that smell and whatever that's, I think, and so when there's places in the Old Testament, like when, and I think he cited it here, when Noah offers a sacrifice after they find it, right? And it talks about, God smells it, and he's pleased by the aroma. particularly there.
Yeah.
I know there's probably other passages too. Which is kind of weird if you think of God as, this bodiless, I mean, I don't know, it's just, he likes barbecue, what?
Yes.
I don't know, it's just,
He roasted a lot of animals, he
Yeah.
must have liked them.
but I know for, it just, yes, the smell is so powerful.
Yeah.
I remember when we first became Orthodox, and my family was Protestant, and my mom and dad came to visit us, and they didn't really like the Orthodox thing. And so my mom went in there and she was like, oh no, we're gonna have bells and smells and, all this. She was kind of, ugh. And when the deacon went down and incensed, she just felt touched by the Holy Spirit and she started crying. And she embraced our Orthodoxy. She never became Orthodox, but after she went to a divine liturgy and they went down the aisle and sensed her and she was braced to not like it, and the Holy Spirit just touched her. And it was the smells of it
Wow.
that she embraced where we were at that point. So I think there's a lot more to our five senses and the smell that we're
Yeah.
talking about tonight than we sometimes give credit for.
I mean, in the book, it talks about how smelling pleasant aromas lowers defenses, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing with incense in the church.
Yeah.
I really think that they're telling us that through smelling it, it's easier to ponder, contemplate, understand. So.
I guess this is just very interesting because I've always only thought of it as that thing that brings us into the experience and allows us to pray with our senses. But it's what I'm hearing from this is because then that raises a question for me, if it's just about our experience, someone who's really allergic or someone who hates the incense, then what is it doing for them, kind of? That's been a question in my life. But this is just showing how it's a praise. It's not about me. It's not about my experience here. It's about glorifying and that verse that's with all my mind, with all my soul, with all my being, I will worship the Lord. With our voice, for the sound, with the smell, with everything, it's all an offering and this sacrificial love that kind of is that, I don't know.
Well, and that's when I mean, Terry, you asked last week if incense was still considered a sacrifice or an offering or something like that, and yeah, that. That's when we're preparing the gifts, actually. The prayer before I sense them for the first time is, the first line of the prayer is, incense we offer thee as an aroma of spiritual sweetness. And so the incense that we offer in church, although it does, what it is effectively doing, if I'm reading the book right so far, is that it's also a welcoming gift. It's not just necessarily for us, but it's something we're offering to God to welcome him into our presence, and, of course, vice versa. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So in the case of mirror streaming icons or incorrupt bodies of saints and relics such as that, are those is that just a case of like, you know, it's just so holy that they're still continuing to, you know, to honor God and to offer this, or is that like, you know, is that for us to kind of make this sort of realization like, wow, there's something here? You know, I mean, I guess
Probably yes to all of it. I don't know that I've ever read or heard necessarily a good explanation beyond kind of what you've already alluded to. I mean,
Have you encountered the everywhere?
that was exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, it slaps you in your face. I mean, how strong that is. And it is, it's exactly like you said, Reader Moses. It's like you smell it and you're like, this is heaven. Like, this is what heaven smells like. I mean, it's overwhelming. We're running a little bit behind, or a lot of bit behind. Let's just consider maybe condensing the last several questions in, like, what makes a meaningful gift? I mean, I always think of the gifts of the Magi.
Okay.
That's such a beautiful
That's great.
Analogy. I thought, I was thinking about this today, and I was like, you know, my wife's birthday, I could take her to like Hawaii for 10 days, and she'd probably like that more. But if I could somehow track down like the menu of the restaurant we went to on our first date, which is now closed, and frame it or something like that would be a far more meaningful gift, you know? Like, so I was just thinking about it in terms of money. I don't know. Yeah, I was kind of.
I think we can easily take into consideration the gifts of a child, because I know that, you know, as a child I probably gave my dad and my mom plenty of drawings that they immediately threw away.
They're all in the attic. They're all in the attic. Okay, don't go looking for them, but they're all there.
But for their special days, for birthdays, I'm sure that whatever artwork I put into a card, even though it's not any masterpiece by any means, but there's a lot of intent and a lot of love and honesty behind that. So yeah, definitely the meaning,
Yeah.
the thoughtfulness.
Well, he did talk about the intent of the heart as being important.
Yeah.
In even the preparation, whereas if somebody was half-hearted about it or didn't put their whole heart into
Yeah.
the gift.
Cain and Abel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me, on that note though, is that the reason? Was it because he didn't really put his heart into it that God?
Yeah, I think effectively. I think he offered.
So it wasn't the actual gift, it was the fact that his heart was not.
Yes, it was. I with Cain and Abel. Yeah, I can. That's the. I forget the exact wording, but it was something to the effect of he gave an impure sacrifice, and that's my translation. Don't go look it up.
Yeah.
But or something like that, and so that doesn't necessarily mean he was, you know, throwing up, you know, the seconds. It was, I mean, my interpretation and what I've actually heard is that he was given with an impure heart.
What I'm thinking though, is that as a Protestant, I actually thought, they always told me that Abel's was of works, because Cain was of works, and where Abel was of the blood sacrifice. But now hearing all this, I'm gonna erase all that. It's kind of like I discovered one more hidden Protestant thing inside my head. I go, what's that doing there? Do you understand where I'm going with this? Yeah, because so obviously it was more of his attitude, because later on there were cereal offerings.
I mean, and they were both working.
Right.
I mean, yeah. There's you like musicals, Oklahoma.
Yes.
What's the song about ranchers and farmers trying to be friends? Oh yeah. Yes, the cowman and the farmer should be friends. Yeah, they're both working. Anyway, all right.
When you talk about the you talked about the first date thing. Threw me into that Dash Rogers thing. What's that movie? Parent Trap with Lindsay or whatever. I don't know. She's both parts, but they reenact the original.
Haley Mills, you mean? I think you're mispronouncing Haley Mills.
Thank you. But they reenact the first date, and
Yeah.
that whole sacrifice brings back what their relationship
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it's not a good stopping point, but it's our stopping point. I did want to ask, and I meant to ask this at the beginning. I have some other thoughts, and maybe we can kind of discuss some of these other thoughts later. If you guys like the book study, if you like this format, we can do this again next semester. I mean, I feel like that's an appropriate thing to say. The other thing we could also do is classes. I thought it might be fun. I mean, you might have to listen to me because I'm boring. But like a patristic survey or something like that. Kind of walk through some of the early church fathers. Who are they? What are they known for? What do they teach? Old Testament kind of stuff, because we don't really hear a lot about it in the Divine Liturgy. And you know, if you have thoughts, we'll talk about it more. But yeah, that's just me kind of thinking about, all right, well, what are we going to do come January? How might we do this? You know, kind of, I don't want to be too consumeristic, but I don't know. It might be fun to do a different format. Or if this works and this is great, we can pick another book and do the exact same thing. I like doing this. This is easier for me. So, anything else? All right, let's.
Are we reading 2 chapters?
Oh yes, good call. Yeah, for right now, let's plan on reading chapters 4 and 5. Actually, yeah, read chapters 4 and 5. Yeah. It is truly meet to bless thee, O Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond comparison than the seraphim. Thou who without corruption givest birth to God the Word, true Theotokos, we magnify thee. Amen.
Father, you sent me out, are you sending questions out?
Oh, you're probably not. Yes, I am.